Jason Wheeler here. I'm one of the pastors at North Park Church in Columbus, Nebraska, and I'm coming to you once again with your life group application questions, and very grateful to be doing that. We're in our Kingdom series. You guys know that. Week 208 of our Kingdom series as we work our way through the Gospel of Matthew. Today we're at Matthew chapter 27, verses 15 through 23. And you guys know we've come to the point in the Gospel of Matthew where it's Good Friday. It's Friday morning, and Jesus has been called before Pilate, the chief priests, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, knowing that they have no real power to ultimately do with Jesus what they would like. They take him before Pilate, and we see here that Pilate's not on board with their plan, but finds himself stuck in the middle and not willing to do the right thing. And we're looking at the last straw, how a society grows evil. So you guys, we'll jump into it right now. You see the key verses there in front of you. I'm sure you got your Bibles open in front of you too. You got something to write on, something to write with. I'm going to read those verses right now, and you guys follow along, and we'll get right into our discussion questions. So here we go. Matthew 27, verses 15 through 23. Now at the feast, the governor was accustomed to release for the crowd any one prisoner whom they wanted. And they had then a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when they gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you, Barabbas or Jesus, who's called the Christ?" For he knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I've suffered much because of him today in a dream." Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus, who's called Christ?" They all said, "Let him be crucified." And he said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." So Pilate clearly knew that Jesus had done nothing wrong, and he did his best to have Jesus released, but the chief priests and the Pharisees were having none of that, and the crowd was convinced to be on their side, and they chose the notorious criminal Barabbas, chose Barabbas over Jesus, chose sin over the truth. So again, we're looking at how a society grows evil, and remember that there were three ways that Pastor Lynn pointed out from our key verses. One was the purpose of government is overlooked. And remember that God's given purpose for government is to restrain evil. And that's not what we see going on in our story today, and not really what we see going on in our world today either, is it? And then second was that popular opinion rules out instead of truth. The crowd gets what it wants. The popular opinion rules instead of truth. And then thirdly, providential order gives them up. God gives them up to what they want. So there's our quick overview. We're going to go ahead and jump into our discussion questions now. For question one, I want you to go back over the story, read it, kind of discuss what's going on there, and then prayerfully consider who you relate to most from our key verses and why. So you'll have to go through there and carefully kind of pull out everybody that's in the key verses and then talk about who you relate to most and why. And I realize that there might be certain aspects of each character or group of people that you relate to, but in general, who do you relate to most and why? Pray about that and talk about that now. Okay, so moving on to question two. In regard to government's purpose being overlooked, the first reason or way that a society grows evil that we talked about from our message on Sunday, remember that Pastor Lynn had 3 points within there of threats to doing the right thing. One was the crowd. We see the crowd being a threat to doing the right thing. Pilate his methods might not have been the best, but he was trying to do the right thing. The crowd got in the way. Influential people are a threat to doing the right thing. And we see that in the religious leaders and the Pharisees. And then, of course, one's own interests. Pilate's own interest kept him from doing the right thing, right? And our own interests can do the same thing. Maybe that's some sort of selfish ambition, or maybe that's just self-preservation. But either way, one's own interest. So those three things that are a threat to doing the right thing. I want you to think for question 2, most about the crowd, and well, all three of them. All three of them are in these questions. So for part 1, how are you most tempted to be kept from doing the right thing? By the crowd or by your own interest? And the two can work very closely hand in hand, right? But how might you be most tempted to be kept from doing the right thing? By the crowd, by popular consensus, by the masses, or by your own interests? And then when it comes to influential people, I want you to consider this. Who is influencing those who influence you? Who are the influencers of your influencers? So a couple parts to that question. There it is in front of you. Pray about that and talk about that now. Okay, moving on to question 3. Pastor Lynn also talked in the message about 3 ways that the church restrains evil. One was by strengthening families. Strong, godly families restrain evil. Secondly, the church stands against the flow of those wicked influencers, the flow against the crowd, popular opinion. And then thirdly, by snatching people from the fire, right? So I want you to think about family at this point. And whether you have whether you're married and have kids, that sort of kind of traditional family, or your family is your church family or an extended family, whatever the case may be, you have family, and I want you to consider whether or not family is restraining evil in your life. And if so, how? And then talk about why you answered the way you did, and what those answers might mean or direction they might give you. Go ahead and pray about that and talk about that now. Okay, and for question 4, I want to talk about standing against the flow. How have you done that recently? That's question 4. And then, was it a struggle? And what specifically did that look like to do that? Can you come up with a specific situation recently in your life where you stood against the flow, the cultural flow, the popular consensus? And again, was it a struggle? What did that struggle look like? What did the situation look like? And then what was the outcome? What happened? Did you gain strength, peace from that? Did you crumble? And was there turmoil as a result? So there's question 4. Pray about that and talk about that now. Okay, and moving on to question 5. So keeping in mind that born-again believers are the only people that can affect any change in what's happening in our world today. I mean, obviously it's God that ultimately does this, but born-again believers can be in prayer about this situation. Remember Pastor Lynn talking about this at the end of the message on Sunday. So bear that in mind, and then prayerfully consider what you're taking away from this message. And prayer for our president, our culture, the leaders. I don't necessarily want your answer to be entirely focused on that. Just bear it in mind as you're asking God to reveal to you what ultimately He would have you take away from this message today. Okay, that's it, guys. As always, very grateful to have been here. And you know how to get a hold of me if you need me. Don't forget about the website, www.insidenp. Don't forget about all the rest of the content that comes out through the week. Pastor Ryan's midweek messages are fantastic. He's got a great series on faith happening right now, and you should plug into that. If you've not been plugged into that, then go back 3 weeks and catch up. And don't forget about Jonathan Kaufman's youth message and youth lesson that comes out every Sunday. And that's it. Lord willing.